Wants me to go out. Wanted to show what me look in a medium shirt looks like right now before I talk to you. So as you saw by my breakfast this morning, it didn't look very healthy at all. I mean, it's probably the most unhealthy looking breakfast that you could possibly think of. What's ironic is that diet has actually made some fairly drastic changes in my overall health, at least in two categories in particular: my weight and my blood pressure. So I don't know if you remember, about a year ago, in the cabin here, I was cooking a couple of meals and I was talking about my blood pressure and how it was high. I wasn't feeling well at the time. My diet was quite poor because I was just working so much. I wasn't preparing healthy meals. And every time I went into town, I was getting fast food. It was just horrible, especially for somebody like me who has throughout my life lived fairly substantial outdoor lifestyle, and also been very aware of my diet. Right from teenager, I used to work out, go to the gym, play sports. I would do a lot of research on diet, and I ate very, very clean and healthy for a long time. I didn't drink until like between the ages of 19 and 30 or something like that. So I was very aware of my diet and very concerned about continuing to eat well. Now, at that time, about a year ago, like I said, wasn't feeling well. So when I was in a grocery store, I used one of those heart rate monitors and a blood pressure monitor, and it came back with a really high reading. And I know those things aren't 100% accurate. When you're walking around shopping and stuff, you're going to have different blood pressure levels, but it was enough to convince me to make a doctor's appointment. Now here in Canada, we have relatively free health care, so I can go and get checkups regularly without having any out-of-pocket expenses, so it's worthwhile doing anyway. And I suggest that if you have access to free or cheap health care, that you do get regular checkups, especially as you reach my age. I'm 48 right now. I'll be 49 in April. And my family history, there's high blood pressure in it. There's just high blood pressure and low blood pressure. I think my mother had low blood pressure and now has high blood pressure because she's getting older. And diet's not great. Hey, Mom and Dad. My dad's diet is not good, and he has heart conditions and high blood pressure, and he's had that since he was in his 40s. Now he's 70. He'll be 77 this year. Still going strong, but on medication that's helping control his health. So I have to be careful for those reasons anyway, because it's hereditary, high blood pressure and heart conditions and all kinds of things that you need to be aware of that can be made worsened by poor diet and lack of exercise. So anyway, I did some research on diet. Back then I made a few changes, back to sort of more of what I've always done, and that's eating healthy, eating more wild game again, grass-fed beef and organic meats, organic vegetables and all that kind of stuff. So I think that helped a bit. My doctor is convinced, he's a traditional or typical medical doctor who believes everything should be cured by medicine rather than lifestyle changes, although recommends some lifestyle changes, but doesn't believe that we can control everything through just lifestyle. So he prescribed me heart medication, low blood pressure medication to help lower it. So between my diet and that, not sure, I'm assuming that medication did its job, and I've had blood pressure in the range of 130, 135 over say 100 or so. So back into fairly safe levels, not ideal, but closer to ideal, and manageable, so pretty stable. I don't like being on medicine or medications for a couple reasons. One, that probably the main one is that I don't want to be on the system, right? Part of what I'm doing here is to get off the system and not have to rely on stuff that I have to regularly purchase and and count on, especially pharmaceutical companies. So I try to avoid that. So I wasn't happy with the fact that I may have to be on these things for the rest of my life. Anyway, the meals that I cook here are often not my typical meals. I'll maybe only eat that once, twice, 3 times a week or whatever. I tend to eat healthier, but they're less interesting things to film and show you. So if I'm just having salad and spinach or something and vegetarian meal or something, it's often not very interesting to show you. So what you see then is sort of a more flavorful meal that I've cooked that's more interesting, but also looks unhealthy. And a lot of you guys are concerned, probably rightfully so, and have made suggestions about how to improve my diet. So one of those suggestions was ketogenic diet. So I did some research, I think mostly based on your recommendations, and my wife as well is not quite as active as I am, and she's gone up a little bit in weight, and she's concerned about that and wants to lower it as well. And she did the research, and between the two of us, we decided we should try the ketogenic diet and see how that helps, see if it helps at all. So we did that. We started that 3 or 4 weeks ago, maybe 3.5 weeks ago, which is the diet basically is an extremely high fat and no sugar diet, very, very low carbohydrates. So your body ends up converting fat into ketones, and the ketones are what provides the energy, especially to your brain. Typically, the brain can only operate on glucose, which is made from carbohydrates typically. So it's an adjustment for your body, but it is potentially healthier for certain things. It's also known as a sort of an anti-cancer diet because most cancers feed off of sugar in particular. So if you eliminate sugar, a lot of times you can actually stabilize or reverse the effects of cancer. I mean, it's not just anecdotal. There is scientific evidence to prove that. I'm not a medical doctor. Don't ever take my advice for diet or medicine for that matter, or healthcare. But that's what research has come back. That's what our research is showing us. So anyway, bottom line is that we tried this change in diet, and here are the results. So that's my blood pressure. And if I scrolled through and you saw some of the previous readings, some of those readings go back to just prior to being medicated and changing my diet the first time. So over 160, over 110 or whatever it was. That's extremely high, or it's in the high level for sure, in the high category. So very dangerous for me to continue operating with blood pressure at that level. And after medication, like I said, it came down to the 130, 135 to like 90 range. Now, today's readings, and I forgot to take it when I got up first thing this morning, so I had a coffee, which is bad for blood pressure. It raises your blood pressure pretty well instantly. I took the blood pressure, and it's around 120 over 80 average. That's perfect. That's exactly where I want to be, or possibly even lower. And I bet it would have been lower if I hadn't had the coffee. So that's the ideal range. I stopped taking the blood pressure medication recently. So that is strictly diet related now and exercise, but I've been getting the same amount of exercise probably over the last year or two. So all I can attribute the change in blood pressure to is the diet. Now my weight, as you can see, I'm in a medium t-shirt and it fits me perfectly even after a year or however long it's been since I started selling these t-shirts. And they tend to shrink over time, cotton especially. It's gone through a lot of washes. And it fits me perfectly. So I've dropped over 10 pounds in 2 weeks, first 2.5 weeks of being on this diet, over 10 pounds. So I went from 185 down to 175. Last time I made major changes to my diet 2 or 3 years ago and exercise. Before I started this, so 3 years ago, maybe 3.5 years ago, I was 196 when I weighed myself. I could not believe I got up to that level, but it was mainly because I was working indoors, an office environment or from home, and not getting much exercise and eating poorly, going out to business meetings and stuff. So I made a change, got down to like 168, felt great. A little thin, I think, for what I do, and maybe little bit too light, but I did feel good and I looked good, so I thought that was a good place to stay at that level. I think ideally, probably in the winter, like right now, I think this 175 weight is probably ideal for me. A little bit of fat. I think probably, depending on how this year goes, I may add weights back in. So I'll either create a kind of a gym here or in the workshop or something. I have a few weights around, and just otherwise, like maybe make some log weight things that I can bench press and deadlift and curl and stuff like that, and then got chin up bars and stuff like that. So lots of things I can do to just make sure that, regardless of how hard I'm working, when I'm not on a particularly difficult project, that I can do something that's incrementally strengthening rather than just trying to stay stable. I like to kind of build my muscle mass back up again. I notice at this age, when I slow down at all, my upper body physique probably right now is a little weaker. Now my legs are probably stronger right now because of the walking around in the snow and carrying materials. So it's cyclical, and I need to stabilize that. Now, if you're a younger guy, it's probably not interesting you that much, but I think it's important at your age that to start paying attention to your health so that things don't build up over time. My high blood pressure maybe because there was lots of periods throughout the last 25 years where I've eaten very poorly and gotten little exercise, and that starts to build up, clogging arteries and stuff that's hard to reverse, if at all. So better to have an entire life of healthy eating and healthy and exercise, and just overall healthy lifestyle, less alcohol, less coffee, and less stress and all that kind of stuff. So it's worthwhile objective. So loss of weight, lower blood pressure, that's been the result of this diet. Now, by no means am I suggesting that bacon and chicken wings are a healthy diet. The intent or the proper way to do a ketogenic diet is to eat mostly healthy fats, which mostly come from vegetable, like grains and more like nuts. Avocado in particular is extremely healthy. Seeds, all the oils that you get from plant material is definitely healthier than all the saturated fat you get from animals. Now, some like cream is still good, but again, you should go organic with all that stuff. All the meats should be organic or free range game, ideally. I'm probably going to have to harvest a bear this year, maybe this spring, in order to get all the fat from a bear. Fall would be better when they're a lot fatter. I know people don't love that idea of shooting a bear, but for up here, that's kind of a normal thing to do. And it's an extremely valuable animal for providing all the things like fat, meat, fur, and other. And that's it, I guess. Anyway, I may have to do that, but I also need to start finding out ways that I can start growing things that I can extract oils from that are healthy. So the goal, like I said, for a ketogenic diet is it's high fat, so it's like 90% fat ideally. I'm probably at 70% fat, 20% protein, and less than 10% carbohydrate, so somewhere in that range works for me. So I probably am losing the weight mainly, or as much, because I'm getting a lot of protein, so it's more of an Atkins diet. But again, I don't think it's sustainable long term, so I need to find ways to change that. So I'm not 100% convinced that all these changes are attributable only to the ketogenic diet. I'm not sure. I need to continue to experiment. I've done that on and off in different periods of my life, trying to figure out what is the healthiest diet for me. I know I don't do well on a plant-based diet, 100% like vegetarian. I've tried that, and I never get to the point where I feel right. And when I do something, I typically, and my wife and I, research things to death, and we try to do things absolutely perfectly. So it's not like we're lacking certain things, or we're calling ourselves vegetarians at the time, and eating mostly like pastries and chips and stuff like that. We go right in healthy, organic, lots of variety, grow as much of the stuff as we can ourselves. So it's sort of an educated approach. So I know I'm emphatic that there's certain things that don't work for me, and a high plant-based diet does not work for me, although I do believe it's quite healthy. There's Callie trying to get it with her dummy, or just trying to entice me to go out. So, long-winded way of saying that I lost 10 pounds basically eating chicken wings and bacon and lots of unhealthy looking stuff. I'm not going to continue doing that. I'm going to improve that a little bit, and stop eating bacon is not good for you. There's lots of bad things like nitrates in it that are just not good for you. It's hard to find an organic source of bacon, of pork that's has healthy fats. So I won't continue to do that. But it's worked for me to this point. I'm going to now clean it up and decide whether I'm going to continue with that or change my diet back to a more interesting, more balanced diet of no sugar still. If you're going to change anything in your life, reducing the amount of alcohol or cutting it out, and reducing sugar alone, those two things that I've done over the last several weeks probably could be attributed to the weight loss and lower blood pressure as well. Coffee I don't drink as much as maybe it looks like on film. This is actually chaga now. I did have a cup of coffee first thing in the morning, but it's usually just 1 cup, and often it's more like an espresso, and I might add cream or milk to that, or just drink espresso straight. This is actually chaga, so it looks like coffee a lot of times. It is black, but it's actually, from all the research I've done at least, seems to be a healthy alternative, and I actually really enjoy it. I actually prefer it to coffee. So that's what I wanted to update you with my health, and if there's anybody else considering that, I'm one of the success stories, I guess you could call it, for that particular diet. If you want to try it, don't again rely on what I'm saying. Do your research, consult with a doctor and whatever other professionals you need to talk to before you make any lifestyle changes, including even the rigorous activity that I do outside. Snowshoeing, I've had some people asking me about that, if they're overweight, and again, don't have a heart attack trying to replicate what I'm doing here, as I've been at this for a long time and worked my way into this lifestyle. So that's all I had to say today. I know, maybe a lot too much talking again, but I'm going to turn off the video now and get inside and get to work and throw that thing for Callie a little bit, and edit this video and get it out to you as soon as possible. So thanks for watching. I'll see you at the cabin next time. Take care.